You learn to ignore certain things when you've worked hospice long enough. The creaking pipes, the flicker of bad fluorescent bulbs, even the sounds people make when they're slipping away. It's not heartless, it's survival. You focus on the care, on the comfort, on being present. You keep your mind on the living, not the dying. That night, the first thing I noticed was the silence. No rustling. No coughing from room 6. No TV noise from old Mr. Latham, who never slept. And strangest of all, no meows. Marzipan, our hospice cat, wasn't pacing the halls like she usually did. She wasn't curling up outside one of the rooms like she was picking her next vigil. She was just sitting right in front of the supply closet door, perfectly still, staring. Her tail flicked once, slow and deliberate, and then she growled, low, long, not playful like she sometimes did with new staff. It sounded almost protective. I should have listened to that, but I didn't. Not first. I chalked it up to mice. That closet was warm and often got cluttered. Maybe she heard scratching, but when I opened it, just to check, there was nothing. Just folded linens, a mop bucket, extra PP. I even shuffled some things around, just in case. Marzipan stayed where she was, her ears twitching back, eyes locked on the far end of the closet, like she knew I was missing something. I remember saying, "You're being dramatic, girl," with a nervous little laugh. I shut the door and got back to work. Vitals, notes, morphine doses. It was a skeleton crew that night, just me, a CNA named Roxy, and Miguel at the front desk. Standard for winter in this part of Maine, where the snow falls thick and slow, like a blanket you can't shake off. But something fell off. At 11:43 p.m., Marzipan had moved, but not far. Now she was lying in front of the supply door, paws tucked neatly, still watching. She wouldn't eat, wouldn't respond when Roxy tried to pet her. She just stared. That's when Roxy said what we'd all joked about in the past, except now she didn't sound like she was joking. She's waiting for someone to die. Marzipan had always had a sixth sense. I'd seen it more than once. She'd curl up outside room 4, and by morning, that bed would be empty. The families found it comforting, like their loved one wasn't alone. But the staff, some of us started to dread her stillness. That night, though, she wasn't by a patient's door. She was guarding something else entirely. Around 3:11 a.m., the hallway lights flickered. Just once, like a breath pulled in and held too long. Then, dead silence. That was when I heard it. A soft, rhythmic scratching, so faint I thought it was my own breath at first. But no, it was behind the supply shelves. Something, or someone, scraping at the wall, like claws, dull and methodical, pacing a line I couldn't trace. I called out, half-heartedly, "Miguel, you hear that?" He didn't answer. Neither did Roxy. I opened the supply closet again, slower this time. The air inside felt warmer than it should have, like someone had been breathing in there. I stood still, listened, and that's when I caught a smell. Not bleach, not linen. It was musty, damp, and underneath it, something metallic. Like blood, but there was nothing. No one. I shut the door fast and didn't open it again. Just before sunrise, I walked past room 2, where Mr. Everett had been checked in just 2 days ago. He'd come in with fatigue, a persistent cough, and a mild infection. Nothing terminal. His family wasn't even expecting to stay the night. But the monitor was flatlined. He was gone. Just like that. No signs. No gasping. No struggle. Just gone. I remember looking at the cat then, but Marzipan was nowhere in sight. We searched the building, thinking she might have slipped outside. Thuff, it was 10 below zero. Roxy finally found something in the east corridor. The vent cover above the hallway had popped loose. And just beneath it, caught on the jagged edge, were clumps of orange fur. 12 feet off the ground. No paw prints. No blood. No sound. Just those tufts of hair, swaying gently from the air that whispered out of the duct. We never found Marzipan after that. Not her body. Not a trace. Behind the wall, and beneath it, long, deep scratches dug into the concrete, like something had been trying to claw its way out. I still worked the night shift. Still chart vitals. Still comfort families through the worst moments of their lives. But every now and then, I catch myself staring at the supply door, waiting, because sometimes, just for a second, I think I hear it again. That same slow, steady scratching. And when I do, I don't check the closet anymore. I just walk away. Thank you to all my amazing viewers for joining me in these chilling, emotional journeys. If this story moved you or gave you goosebumps, hit that like button and subscribe to join us deeper in the shadows. Every like breathes life into another tale, and every subscriber becomes part of our growing circle of listeners. Now, take a deep breath because our next chilling story is just around the corner. I didn't want to shift. I'd picked up 3 doubles already that week, and my body was running on coffee and muscle memory. But Ray had called out sick, and we were short-staffed as usual, so I nodded and clocked in for the night. Quiet nights were rare, but sometimes silence is worse than chaos. It was the way the building breathed that got me first. The hospice was built into the east wing of what used to be St. Callista's Asylum, a towering, stone-clad relic that had long outlived its original purpose. Most of the place had been shut down for decades, with only this wing remaining operational. The rest? Boarded up, gutted by asbestos, left to time and rot. You could feel in the walls, like they remembered every scream, every silence, every soul that was never really free to leave. The hall was dim that night, just the emergency lights humming with a soft, yellow glow. The usual residents were asleep or medicated into peace. Except roommate, Miss Lively, new patient, no family, mid-80s, late-stage dementia. I'd read her intake file on my break. She used to be an antiques dealer, then a hoarder, living alone in a crumbling Victorian until the city declared it unfit for occupancy. EMS had found her sitting among stacks of yellowed newspapers and broken dolls, muttering to a cracked mirror. She didn't speak much in the daytime, but that night, when I checked on her, she was awake, staring at the wall behind her bed, lips moving like she was whispering to someone just out of earshot. "She keeps feeding them," she said without looking at me. "Or they get hungry." I asked her what she meant. She just chuckled and held up an old butterscotch candy in a crinkled wrapper. Then she rolled it under the bed like a marble. That's when Domino started acting strange. Now, we always joked about Domino being the most dramatic cat alive. He strutted like he owned the hospice, ignored people unless they were dying, and had a habit of squeezing himself into impossibly small places. But that night, he was more than dramatic. He was disturbed. He slinked into room 8 around 11 p.m., and I didn't see him come out for hours. When I peeked in later, he was under Miss Lively's bed, ears flat, growling at the far corner like something was down there with him. I crouched to look, but of course there was nothing. Then the scratching started. Faint at first, barely audible, a soft drag of something against plaster. It came from behind the bed, the wall Miss Lively wouldn't stop watching. I told myself it was mice. Old buildings like that always had rodents. But Domino's bristled so hard he looked twice his size. And when I tried to pick him up, he hissed at me, then jumped onto the dresser. And that's when I saw it. He was standing there, rigid, staring into the vent above Miss Lively's head. A square of black metal about the size of a loaf of bread. The cover was missing. It had been like that for months, a maintenance issue no one got around to fixing. But what disturbed me wasn't the open vent. My chest tightened. I looked back toward the hallway, empty. When I stepped fully into room 9, Matilda jumped off the sill and slinked toward Mr. Henrik's bed. That's when he woke up, gasping like he'd come up from underwater. She brought it with her, he hissed, eyes wild. "Tell her to take it back." I reached to calm him, to help him lie back, but he thrashed, started screaming, clawing at his arms like something was crawling beneath his skin. Blood welled beneath his nails. When we pulled up his sleeves, the wounds didn't look like self-harm. They were long, deep, and oddly angled, like something had clawed outward from inside him. We sedated him, got him stable, logged the injuries, but I couldn't shake what he'd said. She brought it with her. I went back to check the hallway. Matilda was gone. She didn't reappear for hours. But the air changed. You could feel it, like the oxygen was heavier, like static in your ears that never let up. And that smell, rotten fabric, hot metal. Everyone noticed it, but no one said anything. Because what could you say? At 2 a.m., I finally told Jordan, our tech, about what I saw. About Matilda being in 2 places at once. He laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. Said he'd pull the security tapes to prove my hallucination. I waited while he loaded the footage from room 3, room 9, and the main hallway. What we saw made the air in that room drop 10 degrees. At 10:31 p.m., Matilda entered room 3, sat by the bed. At the exact same moment, on all 3 feeds, Matilda entered each room. Room 3, room 9, and the hallway camera. Same posture, same timing, same flick of her tail, all simultaneously. "That's not possible," Jordan whispered. Then we loaded the final 45 minutes of Mr. Henrik's footage. There was nothing, just static, a faint purring in the audio track. But no image, no record of his attack, no Matilda, no screaming, just a flicker of white noise and a sound like wind filtered through a throat. We checked the other rooms. Same thing. Several had brief blackouts, a few with odd timestamps, glitches we thought, but always paired with that same sound. And that smell. Over the next 2 days, 3 patients passed suddenly. No prior signs, no pain, just stillness. Like someone had reached in and stopped their hearts gently, without warning. We found Matilda on the 3rd day. Or rather, I did. I'd gone down to the cold storage to retrieve something for the night nurse. One of the freezer drawers had jammed halfway open. When I pulled it free, I nearly screamed. There she was, curled inside like she'd been placed there. Fur pristine, eyes closed, purring and humming. A low, vibrating hum that I felt in my teeth more than I heard. Her mouth wasn't moving, but the sound was there, radiating from her chest. I picked her up. She was warm, dry, calm. I asked everyone if they'd put her there as a joke. No one had. We ran more footage. The cameras showed the freezer drawer opening at 3:03 a.m. No one touched it. No one came or went. The drawer simply slid open, by itself. Matilda hasn't acted strange since. She still walks the halls, still curls in the laps, still flicks her tail with that same lazy rhythm. But I don't trust her anymore, because some nights, when I'm the only one left on the floor, I hear her purring behind closed doors. Then I check, and the room is empty. Other nights, I see her sitting in one hallway, and then again at the end of the other. Identical, unmoving, waiting. I keep my mouth shut now. I do my job. I treat the living. But I've stopped watching the cameras. And I never go near the freezer drawer after dark. There's a rhythm to working hospice. A kind of quiet that seeps into your bones after midnight. Some nights, it's peaceful. The slow breath of tide and wind outside the windows. The gentle hush of patients resting. But other nights, it hums. Like something under the floorboards is pacing. I've been on for 6 nights straight. Back-to-back graveyard shifts. Staff was short, patients were high-need, and my body was running on caffeine, cheap vending machine soup, and pure stubbornness. I don't remember falling asleep. I only remember waking up. It was sometime after 3 a.m. The staff lounge was dark except for the weak emergency light above the microwave. The vinyl couch beneath me groaned when I shifted. And there she was, Elspeth, the hospice cat. She was curled on my chest, her paws tucked neatly beneath her. Her yellow eyes wide, unblinking, locked on mine. I remember thinking she felt heavier than usual, like she was made of stone or waterlogged wool. Her fur was slick, soaked through, and her purring, God, her purring, it sounded like it was coming from inside my skull. Then I saw it, seaweed, wrapped around my fingers, tangled and damp and stinking of salt and decay, like it had just been dragged from the shoreline. The thing is, we're not close enough to the water for that. The cliff edge is a 5-minute walk from the facility. Locked gates, fenced perimeters. I never left the building. But the brine on my hands, the sand in my shoes, said otherwise. I didn't tell anyone. Chalked it up to exhaustion. A weird dream. Maybe I walked in my sleep. Maybe someone was messing with me. But the next night, it happened again. I dreamed I was in the ocean. Not floating. Sinking. Pulled under by invisible hands, the cold like knives in my chest. And above me, on the rocks, Elspeth sat, perfectly dry, perfectly still, watching me disappear beneath the surface. When I woke up, I was gasping, and my shoes were wet again. The other nurses started noticing things, too. Rory, the CNA, said she'd seen an old patient, Mr. Delaney, walking the hallway. He'd passed 2 weeks ago. Clear as day, she said. He nodded at me and turned the corner. She thought it was stress. She thought she imagined it. But I know she didn't. Because that same night, I passed room 12, the room he died in, and found Elspeth sitting just outside the door. Her eyes fixed on something inside. I looked. Nothing was there. But the window was open. Wind howling. Salt in the air. Then Rory vanished. Just stepped out for a smoke break and never came back. Security footage showed her walking toward the side entrance. Then nothing. Not even static. Just gone. They brought in search dogs. Drones. Nothing. The cliffs out back are steep, jagged, and merciless in winter. They assumed the worst. I assumed otherwise. I started following Elspeth. I had to know. I had to see where she went after she watched me sleep, after the others started dreaming of waves and drowning in cold fingers. She would always disappear after 2 a.m., slinking down the hallway, pausing only once to look over her shoulder, like she was waiting for me. One night, I followed her outside. I don't know why I didn't stop. The wind was cutting through my jacket like needles. Rain had turned to sleet, but she moved like she didn't feel the cold at all. She kept walking down the overgrown path behind the hospice, past the rusted no-access sign, right to the cliff's edge. And that's where she stopped. Her tail flicked once. Then she turned to look at me and vanished. No leap, no stumble, just gone, like fog burned off by moonlight. I didn't sleep that night. Haven't really slept since. The next day, she was back, sitting on the staff desk like she'd never left. But something was wrong. Her left eye, once golden, was now milky white, like it had been rolled in glass. She blinked slow, watched me harder than she ever had before. Her purr had changed too. It wasn't a sound anymore. Not really. It was more like a vibration that got under your skin, a pressure behind the eyes. Like the ocean low, endless, ancient. I moved out of the lounge. Started doing my charting in the hallway, under the lights. Told the others I prefer to be near the patients. But really, I was terrified of sleeping. Because every time I close my eyes now, I see her. On the rocks. Waiting. And when I wake up, my lips taste like salt. I've walked through a lot of old buildings in my time. Nursing homes gone bankrupt, hospitals stripped to bare studs, even a few morgues that got turned into community centers. But none of them felt like this place. It was the stillness. Not peaceful, not silent, just paused. Like everything was waiting to start moving again. They called it Rose Hill Hospice. Once a pediatric facility perched just outside Albany, it had been closed for over a decade after the funding dried up. No scandal, no tragedy, just left behind. The city approved its demolition. A company was contracted to clear out the last of the furniture and medical equipment before the wrecking crews came through. I was hired on as a short-term nurse consult to help catalog anything sensitive, medication records, intake logs, a few old patient files. It was supposed to be quiet work. A clipboard, a flashlight, a dust mask. No patients, no families, just echoes, and a cat. She was ginger, lean, and clearly old, but she looked healthy. Too healthy for a place that had been sealed up this long. The demolition foreman called her Rusty, but the name didn't suit her. She moved too silently, watched too intently, always just out of reach. She didn't leave. Even when the trucks rumbled up and the floodlights clicked on, she stayed, wandering the hallways like she still had work to do. I noticed her scratching at the same door every day. Room 24. But here's the thing. The intake logs said there were only 23 patients when Rose Hill shut down. 23 children. 23 rooms. And yet room 24 was very real. At the end of the west hallway, locked tight. No nameplate. No records. No key. The others said it must have been an old storage room. But Rusty, or whatever she was, kept going back, scratching at the base of the door, sitting outside it for hours, tail twitching. One night, I swore I heard her howling. Not like a cat, like something being called. I started sleeping in the admin office, just for a couple nights. The hotel was a 30-minute drive, and the weather had turned nasty. I figured I'd finish faster if I stayed on site. That's when the weird stuff began. I brought in an old baby monitor, just to test one that was left behind. It was meant for a storage bin. I wasn't expecting to hear anything. But around 2 a.m., While I was going through the last of the supply closet logs, it crackled to life. Laughter. Children's laughter. Not recorded. Not distorted. Not far away. Close. Clear. And playful. I froze. Let the monitor sit on the desk for a minute. Then it went quiet. That night, I walked past room 24 again. I didn't mean to. It was just on my way to the kitchen. But something had changed. There were faint footprints in the dust outside the door. Small, bare, leading toward the hallway and disappearing before they reached the corner. I didn't sleep much after that. The next day, I found a stack of old crayon drawings in one of the nurse's break room cubbies. Most are what you'd expect: flowers, stick figures, sunshine. But one set had been tucked between two training manuals. They were different. All of them showed the same two figures, a nurse and a cat. In one, the nurse was holding hands with several children, smiling. In another, the nurse stood at the edge of a cliff, the cat curled around his feet. And in the last one, the lines scribbled hard like the child had drawn in a frenzy. The nurse was inside a burning building, windows glowing red but smiling. Always smiling. I looked closer. The nurse's face was mine. I told myself I was imagining things, that the features were generic, that it was coincidence. But it wasn't. There was even a name scribbled in crayon in the corner of one. Cass' son. Not quite right, but close enough. On the final night before demolition, I couldn't help myself. I walked to room 24, and the door was open. The hallway behind me went quiet. Even the hum of the portable generator outside dulled, like sound had been swallowed. The room was dim, dust swirling in the beam of my flashlight, but the walls were alive with drawings. Hundreds of them, all done in crayon, paper taped haphazardly to peeling paint, all showing the same nurse, the same cat, the same fire. And in the very center of the room, drawn directly onto the drywall, was a final image. A bed, empty, but beneath it, in big red letters, room for one more. That's the last thing I remember clearly. I must have blacked out. There's a gap in my memory I can't explain. 1 second I was inside that room, and the next I was outside on the lawn, gasping, barefoot, covered in soot. The building was on fire. By the time the first engines arrived, Rose Hill was engulfed. A controlled demolition no longer necessary. They searched the wreckage for remains, maybe a squatter, maybe a curious worker. But no one was found. No body, at least. Except for the cat. She was sitting on a scorched beam that had fallen across what used to be room 24. Fur spotless, eyes bright, watching the space where the door had been. Waiting. They said I was lucky, that I must have escaped and gone into shock. But I know I didn't escape. I was let go, because whatever was in that room, it still wants company. Thank you all for joining me on these deeply human journeys. Your support means the world, and reading your reactions and your own personal experiences in the comments. It's one of the most meaningful parts of this work. If these stories gave you chills or made you pause and reflect, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more. We explore the haunting, the emotional, the unexplained, and always with reverence. Have you ever had an experience like John's? Or maybe you have your own story of an unexplainable presence, a quiet moment that still echoes in your heart. I'd love to hear it in the comments below. Each of your stories adds something special to this growing community of listeners, of feelers, of souls who believe there's more out there than we often see. And if someone you know might appreciate a good scare or a good cry, please share this video with them. There's more to come, more stories to tell. And remember, sometimes the scariest tales are the ones that could happen to any of us. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video, if you dare.